Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we will also have two reports of the most consistent top performance venture capital and the most consistent top performance venture capital. Therefore, I would like to invite to the stage the head of Asian Operations of Preqin, Mr. Fai Kam, to deliver the report of the most consistent top performance venture capital. Please come to the stage.
Is this mic on? Yes, excellent. Right, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with all you founders and financiers of the venture cap industry. To change things up a bit, Preqin, I'm from Preqin, and we are not a portfolio company of EV, but then we are collaborators in uncovering more information and making the VC market more transparent. And it's in that spirit of bringing about more transparency that Wilson has invited us to share some data with you today. Would it be possible to get the clicker, if that's all right? So venture capital is arguably the most exciting, asset class in the investment world right now. And all of us are part of that, but then what I'm going to talk about is probably the part of the industry which is pretty opaque, which I'm not too familiar with. So we are the leading data provider in alternative investments, and I'm very proud to say that this year we won the Queen's Award for Outstanding Enterprise. And you can see that we have a very global platform. With most of our officers in Asia, and I'm also very pleased to say that in the spirit of uncovering more information and data on APAC, we are going to open a Japan office at the end of this month. So I'm going to talk to you, bring you through some of the key points of the venture cap industry, starting with AUM and then fundraising. We're going to look at the case for ASEAN as well as deal making and whether there's a further headroom for growth. So AUM really is a measure of health, is a key measure of health for the industry, and that's basically measuring all of the money that's linked to VC in the entire world. And here you can see that there's been a huge growth in global venture capital, not just here in ASEAN, but in Silicon Valley, in China, all across the world. Much of the increase can be attributed to unrealized value, which basically is the combined value of all active VC stakes in portfolio companies. And this is the picture for ASEAN, and you can see that it's pretty much the same accelerating growth. The key bit here, though, is ASEAN is growing at a much faster rate than global venture cap. And that's really good news for us here. And we see most of the growth again in unrealized value, and that's because a lot more deals are being done in ASEAN these days. And since the China-US trade rhetoric began, the immediate impact for us has been a lot more interest in ASEAN as companies seek supply chain diversification. And we should expect to see more growth regardless of how the trade story plays out, as manufacturers see the value of a permanent diversification. So where is all this money coming from? So we took a look at our data. There are about 350 fund managers in the VC space which call ASEAN home. Unsurprisingly, more than half of them are in Singapore, but then there's also a substantial proportion headquartered in Indonesia as well as Malaysia. And that's for multiple reasons. But when we speak to the industry, the most important reason that they tell us is proximity to their investments. In the VC world, having boots on the ground, speaking the local language, having the necessary network are particularly crucial for success. And the amount raised by these 350 odd fund managers has been phenomenal in the last few years. So from just 90 million USD 10 years ago, ASEAN managers now raise more than $1 billion each year, and that number is quickly rising. To be sure, ASEAN is still a small cog in the whole of APAC. The biggest really in the neighborhood is Greater China, and it's not shown on this graph because it will skew the scale of what I want to point out to us here. China is about 100 times that of ASEAN. Japan, Korea, and India are also quite important regions in APAC. But coming back to ASEAN, you can see that that chart is rising quicker in the second half of the last decade compared to the first half. And that shows a rising, rapidly increasing investor interest in this part of the world. And for a region that is not yet an economic union, we have done surprisingly well for ourselves. What this means for most of you here is that we are standing at a point in history where venture funding is at its peak. There's never been a better time to be a founder. 20 years ago in Singapore, parents would tell their kids, you need to study hard so that you can get to a good school, so that you can get a good degree and get a good job. You can work for EDB, you can work for Temasek. But the narration is changing. And parents used to think that starting a business was really tough. Entrepreneurs worry about source of funding and when they could turn a profit. But these days, abundant financing is driving innovation, development of really clever products, and providing founders with more resources to grow their client base. And ASEAN stands to benefit from this mindset change because the industry has demonstrated to investors that there is good money, good returns to be made here. And good returns is measured in something called BM. And it's not BMW, but benchmark. So what exactly is a benchmark? A benchmark is taking a group of peers which are comparable, perhaps in terms of the size of the fund, vintage year, strategy, and grouping them together and seeing how and what is the median level of returns, what's the top quartile level of returns, and what's the bottom quartile. And this is a screenshot taken from our recent Southeast Asia report, where we launched the world's first Southeast Asia private equity venture cap benchmark. And here I would like to send my appreciation to Wilson for collaborating with us on this report. He gave his insights on how he selects founders with paradoxical personality traits, and that's helped us to bring more transparency to the industry. So this chart here shows a comparison of returns between APAC as well as Southeast Asia. From a top-level perspective, it seems that the median net multiple of an ASEAN fund is usually higher or even on par with APAC funds. And in fact, there's also a tendency for the worst performing funds in ASEAN to do better than those in APAC. And also, we can also see a higher gap between the minimum as well as the maximum returns for APAC funds. However, you can also see that the universe of available data for ASEAN is a much smaller data set. And it might look low, but this translates to us having the performance data for 1 in 5 funds in ASEAN. So this apparent lower dispersion of returns for Southeast Asia stems from the fact that the data set is small, the group of ASEAN funds is small, and that increases the survivorship biasness. So really, a benchmark is for a fund manager or an investor to look at and ask, am I doing better or am I doing worse than my peers? So one manager which has answered this question beautifully, of course, is East Ventures. So this is a table of the top performing venture cap managers worldwide. It's not just in Asia, but worldwide. And this is taken from a report we published earlier this year. And it's ranked by the average quartile, which is the column on all the way to your right. So that's essentially a score based on how many funds a manager has that outperforms a peer group. And in this case, the lower the score, the better. Mathematically, the best score possible is 1. Right, so you can see that there are 5 number ones in this table. These 5 are the joint top of the venture capital world globally. So East Ventures is not third place, it's only ranked third in terms of alphabetical order. What this data also shows us is that East Ventures is best in breed for any LP looking for a manager that consistently delivers great results operating an ASEAN early stage strategy. And if we compare EV with peers using other parameters, such as the top performing funds in ASEAN with a vintage between 2009 to 2015, Wilson and his team again come up tops. What are some of the tailwinds that are on ASEAN managers to be driving top performance? I guess all of the speakers and panelists before me have talked about ASEAN as a really good place for investment. You know, we have a great and central geographical location, and I found this map online. So this is a map of sea routes across the world, and every dot here represents a container ship. So the brighter the area, the more ships there are that traverse the route. You can see that in the Straits of Malacca, activity is particularly high. In fact, it accounts for 40% of the world's trade, and Singapore is at the heart of that by being the second largest port in the world by volume. ASEAN also has very international air links, and you can literally get to anywhere, any city in the world from an airport in ASEAN. And like I mentioned earlier, the trade tensions between global powers result in early short-term gains for Southeast Asia. And as a bloc, we have been able to negotiate for trade deals. And we now have FTAs with every major economy in APAC. There's also the sizable combined market, which I'm sure all of you know by now. And there's this bit on this slide which I wanted to talk about, and that is how important favorable government policies are. Nearly every economy in Southeast Asia has some form of government body that encourages VC. Indonesia here, you have your Nexticon program, you have your 1,000 startups, making Indonesia 4.0, as well as tax incentives for fund managers to be investing locally. Malaysia has MAVCAP and Cradle Fund, while Thailand has a digital economy fund. And all these will contribute to a healthier VC ecosystem for our part of the world. So just as a wrap up to my presentation, I wanted to show you this slide. It's a look at the deals that have been done in Southeast Asia over the years. That's in terms of the aggregate value of these VC deals. So we know that it's been heating up, but this is the extent to which it is heating up. More than 2,500 venture cap deals have been made in this region in the last 10 years, with about $30 billion invested. And this now makes us the largest VC investment ground in Asia, apart from China and India. And you can tell by these bars that our growth is accelerating. And particularly exciting is Indonesia's share of Southeast Asia, from very low before 2016 to now making up more than a third of all VC activities in the region. And this speaks of your effort to innovate and to grow. About 1/3 of this capital has been deployed into just one company, and that is Grab. Close to $10 billion have been raised by this giant, as we all know. But significant capital has also been raised by unicorns like Tokopedia and Traveloka. And if there's one trait that we observe as a third party of this venture cap world, it is their ability to transform. So Traveloka started out as just a solution to book flight tickets, but now users can go onto their websites to book Japan rail passes, hotels, pay bills, and this encompasses the whole gamut of travel and lifestyle products. And both Grab and Gojek have morphed from just a ride-hailing app to a super app now, offering everything from food and parcel delivery to e-payment to hotel bookings. And such morphing is increasingly commonplace and necessary for growth. It follows in the footsteps of industry giants like Google, which transformed from a search engine to a global innovator in language translation, server provider, phone maker, and also the world's largest advertiser. So I've come to the end of my sharing. I hope this was insightful and helpful for you. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fai Kam, and please stay on stage. And now I would like to invite Mr. Batara Eto to hand over the special token of appreciation.
Hey, thank you so much for the insight.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Yeah, and thanks for the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.